When we say dirty, we don't mean bad, especially when using the term while referring to an NBA player. Most of the NBA players famous for being the dirtiest are the best defensive players, because that's what being dirty means in basketball. In this video, let's take a look at 25 dirtiest NBA players. Let's get started. First off, we have Reggie Miller, the Indiana Pacers star who spent his whole career of 18 years with the same team. Used to be one of the dirtiest players the Pacers ever had. He was the one to invent the leg kick on his jump shot, and we believe that other players are grateful for him to do so. The player had mastered getting the opponent whistled for something he'd done. Up next, there's Scottie Pippen. Everyone knows about him, and we all know how he's one of the dirtiest players in the history of the NBA. Scottie wasn't an ordinary player to be on the court with. From what we know, Pippen was always fierce and went the extra mile to ensure his team won. Reportedly, the basketball player would literally go on to slap, bump, or even snatch if it meant it would benefit his team. Well, that's some dirty moves to play. Not just that, here's why we think Kurt Thomas is also one of the dirtiest players. Kurt Thomas probably got into the NBA entirely because of his dirty play. He even had a nickname because of his play, Dirty Kurt. Many have agreed that when he's present on the court, it's pretty intimidating to be around him. But surprisingly, he was amazingly nice when off court. Apparently, Tim Duncan is also one of these players. We can't deny that Duncan is probably one of the greatest defensive players in the NBA, but that's because he knows how to get away with the dirty play. He's widely known for his sneaky pushes and getting away with fouls most of the time. It might trigger some fans because he's a player with a clean reputation, but dirty play goes on everywhere. Also, let's talk about the obvious, Isiah Thomas. We can't deny this one ever. Thomas is one of the greatest players and loved playing dirty. If you look at his famous game moments, you'll realize that Thomas was never shy of slapping away the hands or wrists of his opponents. As his fans describe him, he was a yippee kind of dirty player and was good at it. Dwight Howard wasn't less of a dirty player either. He jokes a lot, but he pushes a lot too. By pushing, we don't mean some ordinary one. He's 7 feet tall, and when he shoves someone, it's problematic. Believe us or not, 6 minutes into the game, and he'll be fouled. He probably loves doing that, so good for him. We couldn't minus Kenyon Martin. What else do you need to know when his mom says he's a thug? He entered the NBA as an athletic player, but later several injuries turned him into one of the dirtiest players we've ever seen. He'd do anything that comes to his mind to keep the game in his favor and would also manage to avoid a foul. Interesting. Let's talk about Karl Malone. Now this guy has a famous track record for being dirty to the level of cruelty. Malone had over 11,000 boards, and every time he went to get one, he'd hit someone. Take a look at some of his actions yourself, and you'll find yourself agreeing with us too. Up next, Rasheed Wallace. Wallace, on the other hand, didn't just use physical violence, but also verbal. We believe he has the record for having the most horrific fouls ever. Talk about being a double-edged sword. Not just that, we also must include Paul Pierce. He loves drama and creates it when bored. He's maybe the master of using the slightest possible physical contact with an opponent to his benefit, while he would be involved in too much contact. You can call it his hypocrisy. We call it a genius mind working fast. Then there's Charles Oakley. He was nicknamed Oak Tree because of how tough he was. He could move any opponent away and no one would foul him for it. In one of his interviews, he said he doesn't know if it's even basketball anymore. Just so you know, this was right after he was assessed with a flagrant foul. Not so surprisingly, Joakim Noah is also a dirty player. In basketball, you either play hard or play dirty, and Noah does both. He is extremely active and energetic, but this energy sometimes translates into messy play. When you watch him play, you can see how he almost always is getting in the opponent's ears, pushing them, and even trying to throw them off. He plays hard and dirty simultaneously, and that's his superpower. Moving on, Kevin Garnett. He could have made it to the top, but some other players are even better at being dirty than Garnett. He slapped the opponents right in their PP while they were up in the air making a jump shot. Not just that, he loved pushing the opponents around and even called them cancer patients. There's no way to forget Kobe Bryant. He learned it from Jordan and never got called, even when we all knew he was playing dirty. He was more like a carbon copy of Jordan regarding dirtiness and getting away with fouls. He jabbed opponents with his elbows, slapped them, shoved them, and scored great points. Not just that, he also used verbal abuse to break his opponents into pieces. Up next, there's Chris Paul. We'd say that Paul has a thing for slapping hands and wrists. We wonder if he likes the sound of it. He's the kind to use every slight brush that seems like it blew him out of a cannon. We love him because he signals by smiling whenever he's playing dirty. Next time you watch him play, notice how much he smiles. Also, Dikembe Mutombo. In life off the court, he was the nicest person you'd meet. But on the court, no one could compare him to being reckless. His elbows were his best friend, and he used them often to take opponents down. ESPN even published a list of 25 injuries caused by him. He could have stopped but chose not to. Following up, there's John Stockton. We can't think of anyone more annoying and bothersome player in the whole history of the NBA. But to be safe, we meant it in a good way. John's an all-time leader when it comes to steals with 3,265, and reports have it that at the moment NBA only has 23 players who've reached half the score of his steals as him. Well, that's some record. After this, we must put Metta World Peace on the list too. Metta World could easily be compared to Scottie Pippen because both have similar tactics. We can say that World did what Pippen did, but with a pinch of meanness. There's a difference between being a dirty player and a cheap player, but we can't keep the two terms away when talking about Metta because he's the definition of both. How can we forget Michael Jordan? He was great, but also the one who'd tell you to cheat while playing. According to him, if one isn't cheating in basketball, he isn't trying enough. And you have heard someone say that, didn't we? Well, that's enough explanation. There was a reason why he was referred to as the invisible foul. And when you watch him play, you understand why. Then there's Mark Jackson. We could describe him as a master of physical point guard that's possessed a little man's body. No body shaming, but his fans believe he used his little man complex to his benefit and proved to the world that he's also good at getting away with fouls and was also mean when playing. Let's talk about Dennis Rodman. He played for the dirtiest NBA teams of all his career. And honestly, he was probably the sole reason why these teams were called dirty. His gameplay was full of pushing, shoving, and a lot of feet and elbows. We think the only thing he didn't do was bite his opponents. Otherwise, you can find an example of almost every dirty play in his game. Following up, we've Rajon Rondo. Celtics fans, don't get offended when we say Rondo plays with nastiness because there's no denying it. His teammates love him, but the opponents? Not really. He's like those spoiled kids who are backed by their siblings and friends and can't be touched. He'd ruin an opponent's game in a matter of seconds, and you'll watch him smile and go on with the other shot. Oh, and how can we forget about Bill Laimbeer? Well, his gameplay is described in the video game they made in his name, Bill Laimbeer's Combat Basketball. The game is more about violence than about the game itself. So was Laimbeer. The thing about him is that he wasn't just a dirty player, but a proud dirty player. During basketball's most physical, Laimbeer probably reigned the whole time. Not to forget Bruce Bowen. We can confidently say that Bowen was the all-time dirtiest player the NBA ever saw. He was a combination of all the dirtiest players in the NBA, and we believe they considered him the king of being dirty. He could slip his foot under his opponent's feet, make them fall, and even break their knees and ankles. Such injuries can end one's basketball career, but Bowen couldn't care less. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We'll soon be back with more amazing videos. See you in the next one.